One of the things that I love is that two films idea of your life. And there's like two stories you can tell. One that is safe and full of regret, and one that is risky and full of pride and joy.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to ask you two questions. The first one is, would you like to live more adventurously? And I don't mean go on big, massive, epic adventures. I mean just live more adventurously every day. What that is up to you. It could be learning fancy new cooking recipes. It could be taking more risks with your business. It might be learning salsa dancer. It doesn't matter. Whatever feels interesting and fulfilling to you. Would you like to live more adventurously? I know that I certainly would. The second question then is, what's stopping you? And if I had to guess, I think there's probably two things. The first is probably a practical reason, probably either a lack of money or a lack of time. And then the second thing that might be stopping you living more adventurously is perhaps a little bit more intangible. It might be something that you're a bit even shy or embarrassed to admit to. If I had to try and guess from a few of you, I might go for feeling inadequate, or worrying what people think about you, or just pure old guilt. They're my usual three. Anyway, I've really come to think then that what we need to do is try and just get ourselves living more adventurously. And I've come over years of intelligent philosophical thought to decide that living adventurously is essentially the same as going skinny dipping in a river. You know, it sounds quite exciting and cool to do, but you're a bit nervous and daunted. You think, oh, respectable people like me don't do stuff like this. And you're a bit nervous. The first step in is cold and horrible. That never changes, but little by little, you do it, and before you know it, you're in there, you're swimming, and then suddenly, you're now the expert, whooping and hollering and shouting to all those timid souls on the riverbank, come on in, it's great once you're in, stop being such a wimp, all you got to do is get in. That's all we have to do. I like the idea of it, but it's hard to do. The Scandinavians have got a wonderful phrase for how difficult it is to start a journey, how hard it is to set out from your warm, comfortable, familiar house into the cold, scary, great outdoors. They call it the doorstep mile. And I wish I'd known the phrase, the doorstep mile, before I began my own adventures. I used to really beat myself up for how hard I found it to start trips. I used to think I was lazy, that I was a coward, that I was pathetic, just because I found it so hard to get going. But there's a world of difference between this, nothing, blank page, so much to do, inertia, and then this. One little cross in the box, one day done, 1 mile walked. You've done it. You're on your way. You've got momentum. And from that, then it's pretty easy to get to this. All you have to do is just don't stop. I want at this point to try and debunk the myth that to be an adventurer, you have to be some sort of Olympian, athletic, tough guy. That is definitely not me. I spent most of my student days being very lazy, mucking about, until I gradually came to decide that what I should do before I settled down to an ordinary, normal life and job like all of my friends was to do something out of the ordinary and difficult before I got on with real life. So I took my £7,000 of life savings and I set off to cycle around the world. 4-year journey, cycling 46,000 miles around the world. I didn't have any special expert skills to do that. It was the most wonderful, wild, overwhelming, exhausting experience of my life. I was not any sort of specialist, but once I got home, I now did have the 3 most important secret weapons, which were self-confidence, experience, and momentum. I was on my way. So from then on, I could start doing more adventures. So I ran the Marathon des Sables in the Sahara Desert, walked across southern India, pack rafted across Iceland, walked across the empty quarter desert, rowed across the Atlantic Ocean, set off on this life filled with big, epic experiences. And that led me eventually to this little red tent somewhere in the mountains in eastern Greenland, properly remote, wild place, training for a huge expedition to the South Pole. I was so happy here in this little red tent. We just finished a long day hauling our heavy sledges. We'd set up camp, the three of us in there. I was doing what I loved with my life. I'd managed to turn what I loved into my whole life. We were laughing. It was wonderful. And then in that tent, my good friend Ben, he just made some light-hearted throwaway comment. I don't even really remember what the context was, about how I was a terrible dad for being out there on this expedition rather than being at home. He said it as a joke, and to all of our surprise, not least of all mine, I just burst into tears, great howling, guilt-racked sobs, because as much as I was living this personally thrilling and fulfilling life of expeditions and travel, it was wreaking havoc with my family life, with my real life. So I'd left behind my family. I felt so guilty. I felt so selfish. I was like, oh, what on earth am I doing? And that was it. That was all that happened. Three British guys in a tent. We aren't very good at dealing with someone crying. So we all just did our very best to just ignore it and get back to just taking the mickey out of each other as soon as we possibly could. And that's it. That is the sum total of my grand, life-changing catastrophe story, which I know is pretty feeble and pathetic. What happened? Real life happened. Real life got in the way. That really was all it was. It blocked all my dreams. I pulled out of the South Pole and all future huge expeditions. So it was only real life that got in the way for me, but real life is a big thing. And that's really what I want to try and talk about today. Because I called myself an adventurer, but I was no longer going on adventures. I spoke at this wonderful event 9 years ago saying, I'm going to go to the South Pole. Never made it there. All of my dreams are gone. I felt ashamed. I felt disappointed. I was so frustrated and really unhappy with life. So all I have to offer you today really then is this, that for every Steve Jobs or Bear Grylls hero, success story, follow your dreams, chase the stars story, I reckon there's a million of us squashed together in this little red tent, reaching big, chasing our dreams, watching exciting, inspiring talks, doing all the right stuff, but just stymied and frustrated by real life. So what can we do about that? How can we still live adventurously, but within the constraints of real life? So I found my adventurous life changing direction. I'd spent years trying to do bigger, tougher, harder than any of you could do, trying to be the best adventurer there was, to now trying to do adventures that were smaller and ever more inclusive. From trying to do more than everyone else, I shifted to saying, you'd love to cycle around the world, but that's not going to happen. Try this instead. You don't have much time to go do an adventure. What can you do? You can still do something. I call these little adventures micro-adventures. Now, everything that happens in life you can see as either an opportunity or a constraint. You can either complain about how little time you've got to do things, or you can try and squeeze in something around the margins of your life and still do something. And by the way, if you try and claim that you are too busy to go for a ride in the woods or to head up a hill to watch the sunset, then I politely say to you that that's ridiculous, and what you really, really need to do if you're too busy to do this is go for a ride in the woods or go for a walk up a hill. I had a long 8-hour journey to get here yesterday evening. I was pretty tired, pretty nervous about having to do this talk this morning, but I still made the effort yesterday to squeeze in time for a small little micro-adventure escape, to sleep up on a hill last night and to find myself somewhere for a little swim this morning before the talks began. It is always possible to do something. So I want to give you a micro-adventure example. My wife and I, we put the kids to bed, and then from time to time, I'll then grab my sleeping bag and my camping stuff and just leg it up the nearest hill, hopefully one without any phone reception at all, and sleep under the stars for the night. My wife, by the way, prefers a hot bath, a very comfy bed, and WhatsApp chats with her friends. She thinks I'm a total idiot. Anyway, I sleep up on the hill, wake up, the sunrise in the morning, run back down the hill, jump in a river, get back home again, back home in time to do the school run, squeezing some adventure into my normal life. And on top of that, as an aside, coming home feeling that I'm a much calmer, better person for this time, better able to give of myself to be a better person, to be a better husband, and to be a much more patient father. And this little 5 to 9 overnight microadventure is no big deal. Of course it's not. It's tiny. But it is a short little hit of all the good stuff, the stuff that feels really important to me in my life. In the same way that having a sip of espresso is not the same as having a massive latte, but it kind of tastes the same. It still gives you a buzz. It still gives you the hit. So I found myself then just trying to champion other people, searching for wilderness wherever they happen to live, making the most of their weekends, getting out with your kids out into the great outdoors and just doing stuff that feels important to you. It doesn't really matter what that is. It might be running or biking or swimming or hiking or rafting or paddling or tubing or foraging or cooking or staying in bothies or just sleeping or even walking a lap of the M25 just to explore the local wilderness wherever you might have to be. It doesn't even have to be active stuff. I mean, you can be out there painting or restoring walls or lighting fires or baking bread or eating takeaway curry in caves. It doesn't matter what you do, just so long as you do something. We can always find the time and the opportunity to do something if we choose to do it. And what I've tried to do is make microadventures so small and so simple to try and get around the barriers of real life that at some point I just have to say, in the most polite voice that I can muster, I'm sorry, there's nothing more I can do for you. It's time for you now to stop being so pathetic, to see what fears and excuses and vulnerabilities are stopping you from getting out there. So my perception of adventure has changed so much in the last few years, since I no longer see adventure as being the domain of rugged men doing rugged stuff in rugged places. Adventure is so much broader than that. And living adventurously really is about the attitude that you choose to charge at life with, doing stuff that's new and different and that scares you and makes you curious, really. And that, I believe, should apply to all of us, even if you think the idea of sleeping in a tent is very, very stupid. However, a problem arose in my own life here because I've been doing adventure stuff, biking and hiking and all that sort of stuff, about 20 years now. And if adventure's about fearing failure and uncertainty and risking stuff, then by me just carry on doing more and more of the same stuff that I'd been doing for so long, the stuff that I was good at, that's not living adventurously anymore. That's me just resting in my safe, happy comfort zone. And really, if I wanted to keep living adventurously, I needed to think very differently about what adventure was going to mean to me. Now, this is my favorite ever travel book. A young man walks through Spain in the 1930s, playing his violin to fund his journey. It's a beautiful, bucolic story. And ever since I first read it about 15 years ago, I've thought to myself, I would love to go do that journey. But I can't play the violin or any other musical instrument. The idea of having to play music in public or sing karaoke or dance is my total idea of absolute hell. So clearly I couldn't go and do this sort of trip. But then I thought, this idea scares me so much. I can't play the violin. I'm probably going to fail. This is a ridiculous idea. That I thought to myself, I need to get out my phone and Google for a local violin teacher. So found a violin teacher, and quickly, before even thinking, I sent her an email. Dear Mrs. Violin Teacher, I really want to go walk across Spain next month for a whole month with no money and no credit card, only my violin. Please, can you teach me enough violin songs in the next 7 months so that I do not starve to death? Yours sincerely, Alastair Humphreys. Send. Forgot all about it. Ding! An email arrives. Dear Mr. Humphreys, this is a very stupid idea. The violin is a lifelong craft. You can't possibly learn it in 7 months. This is a very stupid, ridiculous idea. You'll definitely starve to death. Come to my house tomorrow morning, and we will begin. So I turned up at this lady's house the next morning. And I quickly learned that the violin cannot be quickly learned.
Oh, it sent shivers down my spine like a blackboard. It's horrible. Maybe I'm being too ambitious.
Maybe I'm being too ambitious, gosh. So I was getting pretty good by this point. This about a month before departure, and I totally overestimated how much violin I could learn in 7 months. And unfortunately, before my anticipated departure date arrived, I had to face the sorry fact that I really couldn't play the violin. And unfortunately, there was only one sensible thing to do, which was either to go do the trip, but just with all my cash and just play the violin for a bit of a laugh, or reluctantly, the sensible option seemed to be just to postpone the trip for a year or two until I could actually play the violin quite well. Fortunately, in life, the only sensible option is not the only option. So instead, I just turned up in Spain and I set off. I emptied my pockets of my final few coins, left them on a park bench, and I walked off into Spain to see if I could survive for a month with no money and only my busking skills. The very first time I set up my violin to play, oh God, it makes me nervous to think about it. I really wanted to scare myself here. I really wanted to be out of my depth, and therefore I'd deliberately not done any busking in the UK before. In fact, I hadn't played my violin in front of anyone except my violin teacher, and I'd paid her for the privilege. So this day, to set up my violin case, open it up, and to begin, I realized I was the most scared I'd been since the day I set off to row across the Atlantic Ocean. Isn't that crazy? Rowing the Atlantic Ocean is quite a scary thing to do. There's sharks and tornadoes and stuff, which I don't know if there are tornadoes. Anyway, it's really scary. And what was I scared of here? What I was scared of here was all these internal vulnerabilities, the things that we hide away and hide behind that stop us doing stuff. I was scared of failing, of course, but failing seemed pretty likely. Failing, I was definitely nervous about that. I was very worried about what will people think about me? What if someone says something mean to me? What if someone's unkind? What am I doing? Respectable, sensible grown-ups are not going to do stuff like this. This is so embarrassing. Am I a weirdo? This was pathetic behavior for a grown man in his 30s. Besides, I was getting hungry, and there was no plan B. So all I could do is just get out my violin, to trust the universe, and to begin. Now, I was so convinced that I was going to starve to death in Spain, because unfortunately, to reinforce my earlier point that I'm not some sort of hard, tough guy, Superman adventurer, I have no idea how to forage. I forage in supermarkets. So if I didn't get cash, I was going to die. So when I found on the road a ketchup sachet, I snatched it up and I ate it down like one of those expensive cyclist energy gels. Free food, free food. This is what I need. God. This was the worst, highly up there with the worst few hours of my life. Standing in this town square, soaring away. I could play I could play 5 songs very badly, about 20 seconds each, and I'd loop through all 5. This gentleman had been sitting on that bench over there for quite a long time. And eventually he stood up, and he walked over to me with his walking stick, and I thought, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. He's going to say, "Senor, enough. Clear off, please. Give us back our peace, por favor." But he didn't say that. Instead, he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a coin. And he gave it to me. And I thought my heart was just going to explode with delight, relief, amusement, and surprise. I'd done it. I'd earned a coin. Before the trip began, I was really freaking out, and I'd really got to the point where I was scaring myself out of doing it. And I made myself a deal. I said, don't worry about the whole trip. Just go out there and get €1. That's all you need to do. Get €1. If you get €1, you can buy a bag of rice. If you buy a bag of rice, you can walk for a week, and then we'll talk. And here, in this one instant, he'd given me €1, a bag of rice, but much, much more than that, he'd given me hope. And I was off, walking here. I'm so rich now from my violining, have some money. I set off walking out into Spain one summer morning, just like Laurie Lee had done. A month, following my nose, cross-country, through these beautiful wild landscapes, dropping down into villages every day to try and busk and earn the money for the next stage. This is not the adventure. Man, cooks on fire, the stuff that I've been doing for 20 years. This isn't the adventure at all. The violin was the adventure. And it was an absolute triumph. I lived like an king on this journey. Some days I even earned more than €3. In a month, I earned €125. No man needs €125 in a month. I lived off banana sandwiches, and then one glorious day, I found in a bin in a park a discarded tub of pork scratchings. Life has reached a high level here. And what about the thing that I was so scared of before I began? The other people. What will people think? Well, of course, that turned into being the great joy of the whole experience, to turn up in little villages and go, and just watch people respond to that, and to help me out, and to send me on my way, walking through the mountains of Spain for a whole month, was a just glorious, glorious experience. This, for me, is not adventure. Man stands on hill and takes selfie of himself. This is not adventure. I've done this all my life. This is adventure for me. Standing up in a town square and saying, here I am, this is my best shot. This is one of the very best adventures of my life. And I really hope that it will encourage you that living adventurously can apply to all of us, whether you choose to cycle around the world or walk around your local hometown or just learn a musical instrument. We can all live a little bit more adventurously in our life. I spent years trying to do big, huge journeys, and ultimately, I failed at that. And I just want to finish now as someone who failed with my big, ambitious dreams in life, but eventually has come out smiling the other side to offer a couple of suggestions. The first is, I don't think we should pin our hopes on trying to have one huge, big adventure of a lifetime, but rather we should try to just live adventurously a little bit every single day. Doing whatever excites us, makes us happy, makes us fulfilled, makes us curious, and makes us a little bit scared. And the second side of that, the second aspect of trying to live more adventurously that follows on from that, is that we need to do something small every single day in order to really be living adventurously. Now, I have a challenge for you today. Actually, I have two challenges. First one, go jump in a river. It's good for the soul. Second thing is, do you remember I talked about the doorstep mile, this tiny little step that gets us out on the cold, difficult journey? What is your doorstep mile? What tiny little thing can you do today? It has to be so small that there's no reason not to do it today. What tiny little thing can you do today that will set you in motion? That might be emailing a violin teacher or nudging your friend saying, hey, you know that thing we talked about? What tiny little thing can you do that will get you in motion today? And if you're still procrastinating on even something as small as that, then I want to finish up by sharing with you one of my favorite websites in the world. It's called deathclock.com. And Deathclock calculates for you the date of your death so that you can stick it in your diary. And if you're the sort of lazy, procrastinating person who needs a deadline to get something done, geez, there it is, my death and all days following. I'd better get on with life. There's not much long left. And so, to the cheerful view of my life ticking away with deathclock.com, I thought I should do something, finish my talk by doing something that scares me, that excites me, that amuses me, that feels to me like living adventurously. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you live, the world-famous violin. So I've been talking for a while, quite happily. I'm now sweaty and nervous. And so should you be. Okay. Ole!